Hey everybody, Bob Stelton here with a few thoughts on today's game. Now, first of all, it wasn't pretty, but it was effective. And I think you could say that about probably every win they've had this season. Seahawks, very uneven today, but the good news, the defense for the second week in a row was spectacular. And they are the reason that they were able to win this game today. Now, the biggest question coming in is how do they muster a pass rush without Jadeveon Clowney out there, who was an absolute beast against the San Francisco 49ers? Well, they did it by committee. You had everybody on that defensive front chipping in, from Quentin Jefferson to Jaron Reed to Ziggy Ansah to Poona Ford, Quandre Diggs, Shaquem Griffin, you name it, Trey Flowers, Shaquille Griffin. Everybody seemed to have a day out there, and they needed it. They shut down a team in the Eagles on their home field that was desperate for a win. They are desperately trying to stay in contention in their division. They're at home, and outside of a touchdown in garbage time with about a minute to go, they held them to 3 points. They were forcing turnover after turnover after turnover. I can't say enough about that defense. Now, offensively for the Seahawks, that's where the problems were. Outside of an early flea flicker that was spectacular, was beautiful. I love the call by Schottenheimer, beautifully executed. There was very little to be excited about offensively outside of Rashad Penny, of all people, who thought that would be the name we'd pop up. But over 120 yards on the ground, 14 carries, including a 58-yard touchdown run, and they needed him because they weren't getting much out of the run game. And another tough day for Chris Carson, hanging on to the ball. I love Chris Carson. I love his violent running style. I love the way that he runs. But this can't continue. He fumbled the ball. They were able to recover it. Then the very next play from scrimmage was a botched handoff between him and Wilson. I don't know whose fault it was, but there's a lack of confidence or something happening there that has got to be rectified as they go down the home stretch. Outside of that, 12 penalties on the day, offensive line problems, picking up the blitz. Russell sacked 6 times. So you leave this one with a win. You're happy to pick it up on the road and go 6-0 on the road. There are things to be concerned about, but 9-2 right now, I'll take it.
In the 710 Sports Pit, by myself, with my breakfast. The Seahawks have ranked inside the top 5 in offense this year and boast the league's favorite for MVP, but they weren't too special against the Philadelphia Eagles. Still, didn't matter because the defense pulled out another really strong performance to catapult the Seahawks to 9-2 on the season, and they're 6-0 on the road. They control their own destiny right now because if the Packers beat the 49ers in Sunday Night Football, Seattle springs to the top of the NFC West thanks to a tiebreaker over San Francisco. It was a big game for Rashad Penny, who had a 58-yard rushing touchdown in his second career 100-plus yard rushing game. The defense stole the show again, which was particularly impressive because this time they did it without Jadeveon Clowney. He's been their top pass rusher, and John Schneider sounded hopeful they could get him back next week in his interview before the game. But for Sunday, I think it was encouraging for the Seahawks to see strong performances from Ziggy Ansah, Rasheem Green, and in the secondary from Trey Flowers, Quandre Diggs, Bradley McDougald. Some notable stats, Seattle's defense had 5 turnovers. The offense rushed for 174 yards against the league's 4th-ranked run defense. Yet another impressive performance on the ground against another top 5 running defense. 5 of 14 on 3rd down, which isn't especially great. It's not really bad, it's just not great. Maybe worse than that, though, is that they lost a fumble. I know it was just a single fumble. They fumbled twice. They lost one. But protecting the football is the emphasis of Pete Carroll's program. I would guess he's not going to be happy about that this week. Still, it's pretty hard to be too critical when they're looking at first place in the division, potentially, tonight. Some injury updates. Jaron Reed is really the big one. He suffered a sprained ankle. Pete Carroll didn't offer too much more in his post-game press conference, but I'm sure that Paul Gallant and Danny O'Neill and Michael Bumpus will ask him more about that tomorrow at 9:30. We are going to be taking your calls starting at noon on Tom, Jake, and Stacy on 710 ESPN Seattle. Get those hot takes ready. Get them ready. You can listen to 710 AM or on the 710 ESPN Seattle Sports app. Talk to you guys then.
How about the Seattle Seahawks? They're now 9-2 and have a 6-0 road record after a 17-9 win over the Philadelphia Eagles. But this one could have been a whole lot easier.
Well, clearly, Paul, you've never watched a Seahawks game before. I mean, they always play down to the level of the competition.
I get it, Seahawks Steve. You don't have to Hawk-splain it to me. I had some doubts going into this one. Jadeveon Clowney didn't play after suffering a hip injury, and I thought, with the Eagles, even with their offensive line having a lot of issues right now, maybe their offense will finally be able to get going against the Hawks defense that just hasn't been good for the most part this season. But how about the complete team defensive effort? Shaquem Griffin, Ziggy Ansah, Jaron Reed, Rasheem Green, Al Woods, Quentin Jefferson, and Poona Ford combined for 3 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss, 2 forced fumbles, 2 recovered fumbles, and 7 quarterback hits. And KJ Wright and Michael Kendricks, 20 combined tackles, including 2 for a loss in this one. Quandre Diggs was a find. He forced a fumble, Shaquille Griffin recovered it, and then you had interceptions by Bradley McDougald and Trey Flowers. Rashad Penny, he had his best career game for the Seahawks. Early in the fourth quarter, where he popped a 21-yard run and then followed that up with a 58-yard game-clinching touchdown. As for the rest of the offense, not good. Russell Wilson got off to a great start with that flea flicker touchdown pass to Malik Turner, but he missed a wide-open Jacob Hollister in the end zone. DK Metcalf had 2 bad drops in this one, including one that should have been a touchdown reception. Chris Carson was involved in plays with back-to-back fumbles. Mikey Apati was called for 2 false starts. On top of all of that, the Seahawks offensive line allowed 6 sacks on the game. This was an ugly victory, and there are a lot of things that the Seahawks are going to need to address, especially offensively going forward in this one. The final thought should be this: the Seahawks defense has now won them back-to-back games, and Rashad Penny has emerged as another potential playmaker for this Seahawks offense. They're definitely going to need someone like him if Carson keeps putting the ball on the ground.